Hello, my name is Preston Shipp, and I serve as Senior Policy Counsel for the Campaign for the Fair Sentencing of Youth, which is a national organization that focuses on abolishing life without the possibility of parole and other extreme sentences for children. And I'm sorry that I'm not with you in person today, but I'm so very glad that you are having this meeting because we are in a moment where there is a strong national trend away from extreme sentences for children. And it is past time for Minnesota to join other states like Arkansas and West Virginia and Utah, Wyoming, Texas. There are so many states that have already passed legislation to abolish life without parole for children. And I'm excited that Minnesota has this opportunity to join them. So my background, I come to this work through a sort of unconventional route. I started my career as a prosecutor here in Nashville, Tennessee. I went to law school to be a prosecutor. That is really my only reason for going to law school is I believed I was going to be a career prosecutor. I very much was interested in criminal law, very much valued public safety. I valued accountability. I valued protecting the rights of victims. And so when I got out of law school, after I clerked for a couple of years for a judge, I went to work in the Tennessee Attorney General's office and just thought that was going to be my career. And I slept well at night. I was part of, handing out sentences, very extreme sentences for young people. But I just believed, if you do the crime, you do the time, and I believed in the system, that it was functioning as it needed to. And that started to change for me several years into my practice when the college that I attended here in Nashville started a college prison program where they took classes out to a local prison and had folks who were incarcerated there signed up, earning college credit. And the guy who ran the program was one of my major professors. He knew that I was a prosecutor. He wanted to offer a pre-law class. So he called me up and invited me to come out there and teach. Which was, it was a little nerve-wracking to be a prosecutor going out to a prison to teach classes, but it seemed like a great opportunity. I was not prepared for what I found when I got there. As happy as I was that folks out there were pursuing education, I was not prepared for just how gifted they all were, just how committed they were to their own rehabilitation. Just how much they were looking forward to a second chance. They just needed an opportunity to prove it to somebody. I was in there in a room with 15 remarkable human beings, any one of whom I would have been very proud to have as a neighbor. And I started rooting for those people. I wanted them to get their shot, but many of them were serving sentences so long, including life without parole, for crimes they committed when they were sometimes younger than 18 years old. They didn't have any realistic expectations that they were going to get those opportunities. And that started to really trouble me. I felt the ground kind of shifting. I stopped, my faith in the system was shaken. I started wondering, well, why do we talk about how we value rehabilitation? We talk about valuing second chances and redemption stories, and yet the policies that we have in place, particularly when we give extreme adult sentences to someone who is not yet old enough to vote or serve on a jury or sign a contract or get married, why are we pursuing these sort of vengeful policies when these people do have such incredible potential to move beyond their worst moment? And be fantastic citizens, start families, work good jobs. So I ended up leaving my career as a prosecutor and got involved in criminal justice reform work. And I'm so thankful that I'm now on staff with the Campaign for the Fair Sentencing of Youth, and will absolutely do anything that I can to support the work here in Minnesota as you look to join those other states that I mentioned that have already passed this kind of legislation. So let me just tell you very quickly sort of about the national trend and kind of where we are with this issue nationally so that Minnesota kind of knows how to locate itself. Back a little over 10 years ago, there were only 5 states who would not sentence a child to die in prison. That really started to change when the US Supreme Court started getting involved in a series of decisions where they really limited when these kinds of extreme sentences can be imposed against such a young person. And the Supreme Court really hung its hat on the new science of adolescent brain development. Scientists are just really catching up to what we've always known from common sense. Anybody who's a parent or remembers being a teenager, we know that kids are not just little adults, that they are fundamentally different. The Supreme Court has said they are constitutionally different because their brains are not yet fully developed. They do not appreciate consequences and risk in the same way that an adult does. They're impulsive, they lack self-control. They're very susceptible to peer pressure. Trauma in particular hits them particularly hard. And so, they're so different from adults in their decision making. That's why we don't let them join the military. That's why we don't let them sign a contract, because they're not anticipating all the consequences of their conduct. And so when a child can pull a trigger just as easily as an adult can, but their brain is not thinking about the same way and they are not as culpable. And so the court started saying we need to hold children accountable in age appropriate ways that focus on rehabilitation, children's unique rehabilitative potential. And so that's what we started to see after the court started weighing in. We started seeing some very conservative states, Texas, Wyoming, Utah, Arkansas, West Virginia, passing laws saying, a child can't be sentenced to life without parole. A child should never be told that they have no hope, but be condemned to die in prison. Since I've been with the campaign, Oregon has passed a law, Ohio passed a law, Virginia passed a law, and Maryland this year passed a law, all of them saying that after a kid serves X number of years, usually 15 to 20 years, that they need to have a second look. A parole board needs to take a look at them and see who that person has become. And so that's what Minnesota has the opportunity to do with legislation. Is you say that you cannot sentence a child to die in prison, no matter what they do. You don't condemn them to die in prison. You always hold out hope, because kids are our most valuable resource and they're the most vulnerable members of our society. And so we have to be careful how we treat them. It's never a get out of prison free card. It's never automatic. It's never guaranteed. Arkansas is only paroling about 60% of the people who come up for review. That means 4 out of 10 stay in prison because for whatever reason, the parole board looks at them and says, they're not ready yet. They haven't done what they need to do yet. We don't believe that we can in good faith say that this person no longer poses any kind of a threat. And so it's always just an opportunity, never a guarantee. But enough states are doing this now, and they've been doing it for long enough now that we're seeing incredible success all over the country. Over 750 people have been released nationwide who were told as children that they would die in prison, and they are doing remarkably well. A study was recently done by a couple of professors at Montclair State University, and they looked at 174 former juvenile lifers and found a recidivism rate, a rate of committing a new offense after their release of only 1%. And if you think about the national recidivism rate, in Tennessee, the recidivism rate is like 50 to 60%. People are going out and committing new crimes. When people who were given these long sentences as children get a second look after 15 or 20 years, and the parole board looks at them and says, you know what, that person has done what they needed to do, we're going to give them an opportunity, then overwhelmingly, almost 100% of the time, they're getting it right. And those people are doing exactly what we want them to do. They're out there, we've got a network that we sponsor of formerly incarcerated kids, and we've got school teachers, substance abuse counselors, entrepreneurs. We've got somebody who started a printing company. We've got reentry specialists and restorative justice practitioners. I work with a number of folks who are formerly incarcerated. They're starting families. They're doing everything that we want them to do. They're mentoring at-risk youth, trying to make sure that other people don't go down the same road that they did. And so this is proven common sense, measured reform that even somebody, who got into this work based on concern for victims, based on concern for public safety, is something I feel very, very positive about. It's exactly the kind of criminal justice reform that we want to see. Republicans can agree on it. Democrats, the sponsor of our bill in Ohio, a very conservative Republican, the sponsor of our bill in Maryland, a very progressive Democrat. This is not a partisan issue. This is a moral imperative that we get this done because kids should not be condemned to die in prison. I also want to just briefly mention we do want to be cognizant that nobody is going to get such an extreme sentence if they did not commit a very serious crime. Overwhelmingly, these are homicide crimes. And so we're dealing with a victim, we're dealing with a family who's lost a loved one, and we always want to be mindful of that. And there are certainly times where family members or survivors of youth violence are very opposed to the person who caused their harm getting a second chance. And we don't want to minimize that, and we don't want to try to pretend like that's not the case. But what I do want to say is that the campaign works with a network of survivors and victims of youth violence. We work with people in Illinois, we have folks in Texas, we have an incredible man in Maryland, all of whom, though they've been touched and their lives have been forever altered by youth violence, nevertheless support these sorts of legislative changes because they recognize that kids are different. And so I think it's very important for us to remember as we look at legislation like this, that justice is not some kind of a zero-sum game, where if we care about a child offender getting a second chance when they're 35 years old or 40 years old, that somehow that means we care less about the rights and the needs of victims. In fact, we recently hired a new staff person whose job is going to be doing outreach to people who have been impacted by youth violence, because it's so important for us to maintain relationships with them and try to see that they get what they need. Because again, the circle of our compassion should be expansive enough. The parameters should include everyone that's touched by this kind of harm. And so it's a real honor to get to work with supported victims. It's wonderful to get to see people do well when they get their second chance. And so this sort of legislation, what Minnesota can do right now, is about hope. It's about being true to our best values, that no child is born bad, that no child is irredeemable, that no child should be ever thrown away as if their life does not have potential. Because we all of us, are valuable. Certainly the most, as I said, the most vulnerable members of our society who have so much potential to transcend those moments. None of us are just the worst thing that we've ever done. And so, as I said, thank you so much for allowing me to talk to you. I'm looking forward to supporting the group that's working on this, the lawmakers who are working on this in any way that we can. We want to see Minnesota become the 27th state to abolish life without the possibility of parole as a sentencing option for kids. And so I look forward to getting to partner with you in that. And I thank you so much for your attention to this issue.